So we've asked our next speaker to give us an overview of the landscape of the housing crisis and the county initiatives and investments that are being launched in order to address it. So it's my pleasure to introduce Linda Gardner. Linda is the director of the county's Housing and Community Development Department. She's one of the quiet champions in this county as she leads HCD, managing millions of federal, state, and local funds, including Measure A1, to create affordable housing and end homelessness. So without further ado, I'm handing the mic to Linda. So, do you want to advance the slides here? This advances.
Oh, okay. Opposite of what you think.
PDF, yeah.
Okay. Good morning. So unlike Josh mentioning my name several times, I don't actually know everything and have all the answers. But I am going to speak mostly about, am I up there? Yes. The programs that my department works on within the larger context of what the county's doing. But you have some excellent speakers in later panels that will be talking about some of what their departments are also doing. So I'm going to focus mostly on mine. And just because I have the mic, I want to say one thing about NIMBY. I think the example that Josh gave of people not wanting heroin users right next to their children as they walk to work is true, but we see people, I think the effort to talk to our neighbors and our communities about housing as a human right and housing as a basic need for people who, of all types, hardworking people, people who have worked and aren't working now, people who have issues and need support. It's a broad range, and we see opposition to supportive, affordable housing and all kinds of affordable housing based on lots of different myths and understanding. So it's not just, because when I heard heroin users right next to my kid walking to school, I think, yeah, I'd be concerned. And actually, my daughter did live for a while right next to one of our finance supportive housing, and I was like, oh, but I also knew. But we have to educate people around the people that are in affordable housing are the same as the people who are living elsewhere in our community, or they're people who are living right next to us but on the street, and which is better. So I just want to put that point out of a broader context around the needs for housing and what the myths are around what people think about that. Because one of the big things we need to do to have more affordable housing in our communities is support our elected officials when they're making decisions about placing affordable housing or subsidized housing in our neighborhoods. They need people to come and speak in favor, because the people who tend to come are the people who are opposing it. And we need to be there to support the right decisions to have that housing that we all know is desperately needed. And speaking of desperately needed, just very briefly, I'm sure you're all very aware that we're in a housing crisis and a homelessness crisis. About 13.5% of our population are seniors over 65. Half of them don't have enough income to afford basic needs. Almost 10% live below the federal poverty line, and we know that the federal poverty line is too low to assess poverty in our very expensive county. And over 10% are homeless. 10% of our homeless are seniors. That was in 2017, and we know that homelessness has been increasing. Between 2015 and 2017, the homeless count in Alameda County increased by 40%. And we see that on the streets. We see that in our communities. But it's increasing since then, we believe, too, even though we are housing almost 1,500 homeless people a year through our homeless housing system. Additional people moving into housing. So in a market like ours, in a housing market like ours, we are housing people, and yet the homelessness is increasing. I want to make a pitch, because in January of 2019, we'll be doing the 2019 homeless count, and if you want to make sure that we are counting everyone who is homeless, so that we and we learn about them, so we're making the right decisions about who needs what and how do we respond, then check the everyonehome.org website. and they will be getting volunteers to help us with the 2019 homeless count. Almost 30% of senior homeowners pay over 30% of their income for their housing costs, and almost 50% of senior renters pay over 30%. And 30%, many people of all kinds in our county pay more than 30% of their income for housing. But that is the sort of standard for what's affordable. But really, if you're paying 40%, you're not doing too bad. But when we look at who needs housing and what the housing market looks like, when we see half of our seniors paying more than that, we know they're making decisions about whether they're buying medication they need, and when you're looking at families, it's things like childcare, whether they're buying food that they need, or whether they're paying housing to stay housed. Rents have increased astronomically, as I think people know, and they're continuing to increase, although the rate of increase has slowed down somewhat, thank goodness. But it's not like rents are going down particularly. They're just not increasing as fast. And we are projecting that they will continue to increase, although at that slower rate. So that's the dismal, very quick picture. The county and cities, but I'm speaking for the county, we are doing a lot of things to respond to that. As I said, I'm mostly speaking about what my department, Housing and Community Development, is doing, but that the county as a whole, we've formed a county homelessness council that is coordinating between social services, healthcare, housing and community development, the probation department, the county administrators, and others, to make sure that we're aligned, that we're working together, that we're maximizing the leveraging of the different programs that we have. So we are doing a lot to both prevent homelessness and move people from homelessness back into housing, and in general to increase the stock of affordable housing for people who are just lower income in our communities. This is some examples of types of programs. And you know, when the question about the gatekeeping, a lot of times that gatekeeping, you know, you have to have HIV, or you have to have mental illness, or is related to the financing sources. So if a program comes from the federal government and it's for people with HIV, then the housing we build, that's one of the criteria. So one of the challenges is matching people who need it with all the different criteria for getting into a unit. One of the things the Board of Supervisors has done is they've put almost $25.5 million in one-time new general fund, which we call Boomerang. When the governor and the state eliminated the redevelopment agencies, in our county, we lost almost $60 million a year in financing for affordable housing development. We passed, and thank you everyone who voted for Measure A1 in 2016, the $580 million housing bond. When you compare those, you see that that gave us about 10 years of what we lost. So it is incredibly important that we have that money, but we're sort of always battling to just stay going upstream instead of getting pushed back by the forces of less federal money, less state money, and rising housing costs. So we've used those monies to help with affordable housing development, with rapid rehousing for moving people from homelessness into housing, with a short-term rental assistance and services to help them get stable and get enough income to support that housing on their own. We've used it for responses to homeless people living on the street in a variety of ways in partnership with cities. So it's all in the sort of framework of preventing homelessness, increasing the health, safety, and dignity of people who are currently unhoused, and then creating more both permanent housing of all types, but also permanent supportive housing and the wraparound services that Josh talked about. The interim housing, I mean, I agree with Josh that what really solves homelessness is housing. And yet, we have a lot of people who are living on the street. And we need somewhere for them to be. because we are a housing first county, which means that we structure ourselves to move people as quickly as possible, or immediately if that were possible, into housing. But the reality is that we don't currently have enough housing for people to move into. And when you're talking housing development, which is one of the things we focus on, that takes years. So that means we have to start. We're seeing the fruition now of units that we financed several years ago. And in fact, in the next 3 years, we will have almost 1,600 new affordable units opening their doors, rental units. And in that same period of time, we'll be doing the pre-development and the financing for another several thousand of units that'll open a little bit later. But in the meantime, we have rental assistance programs that can help people access housing that exists now, but they can't afford it. But we know that we need somewhere safe and dignified and decent for people to live rather than in a tent or on the street. So we do have some programs that are helping with, and we have some planned responses that will increase what I like to just call interim housing, which is a combination of sort of shelter type structures or programs and transitional housing type programs. We also have a new $10 million from the board that's for capital expenses to address homelessness. So what we're hoping to do with that money is create some new, do people know what the Henry Robinson is in general? So it's a single structure with about 140 beds, I think. People have either a single room or a shared room. As Josh mentioned, the City of Oakland, with some county assistance, it's about to open a second building like that with about 90 beds. We're hoping with that $10 million that we will create at least one more of that type of interim housing. I have 3 minutes. Okay. I like to talk about what this stuff does. I'm pretty passionate about it, but I'll move up faster a little. But also, we're going to we're proposed to the board to spend some of that money to improve interim housing options by helping with things that prevent people from wanting to live there. For example, people have possessions. A lot of times if you're moving into a shelter, you can't bring everything you've got. So having more places for people to store their possessions, places for people to have pets when they are living in interim housing, and places for people to stay with partners instead of having to be separated. I do have more than 3 minutes of stuff, so I'll hurry. And then we also have $32 million spread over 5 years of new money, and that's in a context of about $90 million that the board is committed for the next 3 years of extra new money to address homelessness. And we're doing a lot of things with those, but I'm going to highlight a couple of them to move more quickly. So we have an anti-displacement program, and we've proposed more money for that in the next coming 3 years. That's legal assistance and short-term financial assistance, both for low-income homeowners and for low-income renters to help them stay housed, prevent homelessness, or just prevent displacement at all. That program is operating, and there's information up there about who to contact, and it's also on the handout that's in the packet and on our website. In addition, for the next allocation, we're asking to focus that, or proposing to focus that on not just everyone, which it will still continue to serve, but also seniors at risk and people at risk for first time becoming homeless, to keep them housed. Measure A1, which was the $580 million bond, has $120 million in it for a variety of homeowner programs. I'm going to focus on a couple of those. And then the bulk of the money's on rental, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to skip down payment assistance because I think it's least relevant. But the home preservation loan program, I think, is very relevant to seniors, and seniors is one of the target populations of that program, along with people with disabilities. So that's for current low-income homeowners, and there are some still who bought their homes a while ago, and it will help make their homes livable, maintain them. If they can afford to live there, but they can't afford to maintain the home, or they need new accessibility programs to live there safely, like they need a ramp or they need wider doorways or things like that, It also has a component that would allow people to build an accessory dwelling unit. So that's an extra unit on their property that's rental, and that would give them an income stream to help them stay housed, or possibly be used to help someone who's extremely low income or low income have a place to live. That's sort of a combination. That program will be starting in early 2019. The rental housing program, seniors are a target population along with some others, as are people with disabilities and extremely low income people. So it's targeted at the most vulnerable populations in our community. And okay, I'm jumping around because I'm trying to hurry. The next couple slides, in 13 years, through the middle of this year, the county financed 451 units that were dedicated to seniors, for very low income and low income seniors. With A1, and that's in the context of a broader array of housing units. And you saw from the slide, if you glanced quickly, that they're in various places in the county. With A1, we have over 1,000 units financed countywide. Of those, about 150 are dedicated to seniors, and you can see where those are in the first 19 projects. We just did an RFP with 20, and we got 27 applications for another several thousand units that include almost 400 units for seniors, as well as additional units for people who are homeless and people who have disabilities. One of the things that I want to emphasize is that there's dedicated senior units, but seniors are also eligible for units that are not dedicated for seniors. And almost every affordable housing development is done by a nonprofit developer, not all of them, but most of them. They are very good, very beautiful homes, and they almost all include at least some service provision and linking people to services in the community. There are some that are permanent supportive housing that have real strong wraparound services. There are others that have a lighter touch. So we have an array to meet different people's needs. And here are a couple of the beautiful ones, and I'll just flip through them. This one is in Berkeley. It's right across from Ashby Bart, so it's really well located. We have them in Hayward. Just showing, they're not all as beautiful, but Cottinger Gardens is more like little not cabins, but smaller units, so that's a more suburban. So they fit right in, they improve the neighborhood, and they provide long-term permanent affordable housing. So in my short time, those are the highlights. I don't know if I have any time for questions, but I want to encourage everyone who's interested. We have listservs, you can sign up for those. And one of the things that I meant to mention, which I think will excite this audience, one of the things that we're proposing to the board with some of the new money is to create a system. It's called Dahlia, and it was piloted in San Francisco. It's to more seamlessly link seekers of subsidized affordable housing with the units that are available. Right now, this is my career goal, is that before I leave the county, when someone calls and says, I need affordable housing, I'm looking, how do I find out? I don't have to answer. Call 211 every day and look at these 20 different websites and keep looking at them every day and see when you get an opening. Sign up for 20 different wait lists. What Dahlia will do is it will allow someone to create a user profile. It will let them sign up to receive notices when affordable housing units are opening or when waiting lists are opening. It'll notify them of that. And eventually, as we roll it out, it will let them submit a simple application to those openings so they can be part of the lottery or part of whatever. And then when they're selected, they'll have to provide more information. But it will make a sea change difference. And for seniors who, I think, as we all age, we're still not as technically savvy often as a whole, I'm speaking personally, as some of the younger people, but we're more than like my parents, but if someone's not able to do their own on an app or a website, then the case manager can help them do that, or the service provider, or someone who's there involved with that person can help them do it. But it will make a significant difference. I'm really excited about that program. I wanted to make sure to mention it. So that was a really quick highlights of some of what we're doing to improve. There's so much more that we're doing, but I'll be around if there are additional questions or things you want to know.